The escape pod stopped spinning, and that was when Vectra knew she was going to die. For the past 3 hours, the small metal capsule had tumbled through the void, its emergency thrusters firing in random patterns to keep some sense of motion. Motion meant power. Motion meant the systems were still trying, but now everything had gone still and quiet. The only sound was her own breathing, raspy and painful through her damaged lung cavity. She pressed her 3-fingered hand against the cracked display panel. The screen flickered once, twice, then showed her the numbers she had been dreading. Oxygen, 12%. Power reserves, 3%. Distress beacon, offline. The pod was dying, and she would die with it. Vectra closed her eyes and tried to remember how she had gotten here. The research vessel had been studying gravitational anomalies near the outer rim when the pirates came. They appeared from nowhere, their ships black and fast. The captain had ordered an evacuation, but there were not enough pods for everyone. The ship's artificial intelligence had calculated who should survive based on injury severity, skill value, and resource availability. Vectra had been deemed non-essential. Her injuries from the initial attack made her a poor investment. The AI had been correct, of course. The Xanthari people valued efficiency above all else. Every resource had a purpose. Every decision had a logical foundation. Saving someone who might not survive was wasteful. It was not personal. It was simply the correct choice. She had accepted it then, and she accepted it now. This was the way of things. Her communication device beeped weakly. She tapped it, bringing up the recording interface. Her family should know what happened. They deserved an explanation, even if it was a shameful one. Dying alone in space was considered the worst fate for a Xanthari. It meant you had failed so completely that no one could justify the resources to save you. Mother, father, siblings, she began, her voice barely a whisper. I am sorry to bring dishonor to our family line. I was injured during a pirate attack and deemed non-viable for rescue. The decision was correct. I understand this. Please do not mourn excessively, as that would be an inefficient use of your time and emotional energy. My research data has been transmitted to the central database. Perhaps it will serve some purpose. I have lived 32 cycles. It was adequate. Goodbye. She stopped the recording and sent it into the void, though she knew it would probably never reach them. The pod's transmission power was nearly gone. Vectra had heard stories about humans during her time at the Research Academy. The new species had arrived in the galaxy only 50 cycles ago, but they had already made quite an impression. Most species found them confusing. They wasted enormous amounts of resources on the sick and injured. They had something called hospitals, where they kept people alive even when those people could no longer work or contribute to society. It made no sense from an efficiency standpoint. The Xanthari elders had studied human behavior extensively. They concluded that humans were dangerously sentimental and would likely cause problems in the galactic community. Their decisions were based on emotions rather than logic. They formed attachments that served no practical purpose. They even had a word for it: love. The concept had no direct translation in the Xanthari language. Vectra coughed, and pain shot through her chest. She checked the oxygen level again. 8% now. It was dropping faster. She would lose consciousness soon. That was good. It would be easier that way. She looked through the small window of the escape pod. Space stretched out in every direction, endless and empty. Stars glittered in the distance, cold and uncaring. She had always found space beautiful, even though beauty was not a logical reaction to an environment that wanted to kill you. Her eyes started to close. The pod was getting colder. The life support systems were shutting down one by one, prioritizing what little power remained for the most critical functions. Not that it mattered anymore. There were no critical functions left when you were going to die anyway. The display panel flickered again. For a moment, Vectra thought it was just another system failure. But then she saw something that made her hearts beat faster. The panel showed a signal, a transmission. Something was out there. She forced her eyes to focus. The signal was weak and garbled, but it was definitely there, and it was getting stronger. Someone was approaching, or something. Vectra's mind raced through the possibilities. It could be the pirates coming back to salvage the pods. It could be a random asteroid throwing off electromagnetic interference. It could be her dying brain creating hallucinations from oxygen deprivation. All three options seemed equally likely. The signal resolved into actual data. It was a real ship with real engines and real life signs. The pod's computer tried to identify the vessel type but came up with nothing. The design was not in the database. That meant it was either very old or very new, or very alien. The transmission changed. It was no longer just a signal. It was a message, words, language. The pod's translation software struggled to process it, cycling through thousands of known languages and dialects. Finally, it found a match. The words appeared on her screen in Zenthari script, translated from the original language. Unknown vessel, this is cargo ship Stellar Ranger. We have detected your distress beacon. Please respond if you can hear this message. Repeat, we are reading your beacon. Help is coming. Hold on. Vectra stared at the words. Help is coming. Hold on. Such simple phrases, but they made no sense. Why would an unknown ship offer help? What did they want in return? How did they know she could pay for rescue services? The message did not include any fee structures or contract terms. She tried to send a response, but the pod's communication array was completely dead. She could only receive, not transmit. The ship out there had no way of knowing if she was alive or dead, conscious or unconscious, worth saving or not. The translation software provided additional information about the message's origin language. It was called English. The ship was human. Vectra felt something strange then, something she had not felt in hours. It might have been hope, though she did not trust that emotion. Hope was inefficient. Hope made you believe things that were not logical, but the feeling was there anyway, warm and unwelcome in her chest. The human ship was coming. It made no sense. It served no logical purpose. But the words remained on her screen, glowing in the darkness of her failing pod. Help is coming. Hold on. She tried to hold on. Captain Jake Morrison had been hauling cargo for 15 years, and he had learned one important rule. Space did not care about schedules. Captain, I'm telling you this is a bad idea, said Ben Rodriguez, his chief engineer. The stocky man stood with his arms crossed, blocking the doorway to the bridge. We're already 3 days behind schedule. Command is going to have our heads if we miss another delivery window. Jake looked at the display screen showing the faint distress signal. It blinked weakly, barely visible against the background noise of space. How long ago did we pick it up? 40 minutes, answered Amy Chen from the communications station. The young lieutenant had been the one to detect it in the first place. Signal's degrading fast. Whatever's out there doesn't have much time left. Could be a trap, offered Lisa Grant, the ship's security officer. She stood near the weapon controls, her hand resting on her sidearm out of habit. Pirates use fake distress signals to lure in rescue ships. This sector isn't exactly friendly territory. Jake knew they were all making good points. The Stellar Ranger was a cargo hauler, not a rescue vessel. They carried medical supplies, machine parts, and food rations to frontier colonies. Their schedule was tight. The company that owned the ship would be angry about any delays. And yes, there were pirates in this area. Going toward the signal could get them all killed. But there was another possibility. The signal could be real. Someone could be dying out there right now, waiting for help that might never come. Set course for the signal, Jake said. Ben threw his hands up in frustration. Captain, do you know how much fuel this detour is going to cost? We'll have to explain this to corporate. They're going to dock our pay for sure. Then they can dock my pay, Jake replied. He moved to the command chair and sat down. Amy, keep monitoring that signal. Lisa, I want full sensor sweeps every 30 seconds. If this is a trap, I want to know before we're in it. Ben, get the medical bay ready. Sophie's going to need all the help she can get. The crew moved to follow his orders, even though none of them looked happy about it. Jake understood their concerns. He had the same concerns himself, but he also remembered the stories his grandfather had told him about the old days on Earth. Stories about coast guards who went out in storms to save sinking ships. Stories about firefighters who ran into burning buildings. Stories about ordinary people who did extraordinary things because someone needed help. You know what Grandpa used to say? Jake asked the bridge crew. Nobody answered, but he continued anyway. He said that the measure of humanity isn't how we treat our friends. It's how we treat strangers who can't do anything for us in return. Your grandpa sounds like he would have been bankrupt, Ben muttered. But he was already heading down to the medical bay. The Stellar Ranger changed course, its engines burning hard to reach the signal. Jake watched the numbers count down on his display. Distance to target, decreasing. Signal strength, still degrading. Time remaining, unknown. Getting a better read on the source now, Amy announced after 20 minutes. It's definitely an escape pod. Small, one life sign. Design doesn't match anything in our database. Alien? Lisa asked, her hand moving closer to her weapon. Probably, Amy confirmed. Running atmospheric analysis now. Whatever's in that pod doesn't breathe oxygen like we do. The air mixture is different. High nitrogen, some helium, trace elements I can't identify. Jake leaned forward. Can Sophie work with that? I'll ask her. Amy opened a channel to the medical bay. Doc, we've got a situation. Dr. Sophie Martinez's voice came through the speakers. She sounded calm, which was good. Sophie always sounded calm, even during emergencies. Go ahead, Amy. We're picking up an alien in a damaged escape pod, non-oxygen breather, unknown species, unknown medical needs. Can you handle it? There was a pause. Then Sophie's laugh came through, warm and a little bit crazy. Well, this will be interesting. Get them on board and I'll figure something out. Ben's already down here setting up isolation protocols. We'll make it work. See? Jake said to his crew. We'll make it work. Lisa did not look convinced. Captain, even if we get this person on board and stabilize them, then what? We don't know what species they are. We don't know where they're from. We don't know if they're wanted criminals or refugees or someone's experiment gone wrong. This could cause a massive diplomatic incident. Then we'll deal with a massive diplomatic incident, Jake said simply. But we're not leaving someone to die in space just because it might be inconvenient. The escape pod came into view on the main screen. It was small and oval-shaped, spinning slowly in the void. Parts of its hull were scorched and cracked. One of the thruster ports was completely blown out. It looked like it had been through a battle. No response to our hails, Amy reported. Communication system looks dead. Life signs, Jake asked. Weak, but present. Barely. Captain, whoever's in there is running out of time fast. Jake hit the ship-wide intercom. All hands, prepare for pod retrieval. Ben, I need the cargo bay door open. Lisa, I want you and Chris down there with weapons ready just in case. Amy, guide us in nice and gentle. The next 15 minutes felt like hours. Amy maneuvered the Stellar Ranger closer to the pod, using the ship's magnetic grapples to snag it without causing more damage. The pod was pulled into the cargo bay, and the doors sealed behind it. Atmosphere flooded the bay, though they kept it separate from the rest of the ship's air supply until they knew what they were dealing with. Jake watched through the cargo bay cameras as his crew approached the pod. Lisa and Chris Palmer, the first officer, had their weapons drawn but pointed at the ground. Ben carried a portable scanner, checking for explosive devices or biological hazards. Sophie stood ready with a medical kit that suddenly looked very inadequate for an alien patient. Pod's sealed tight, Ben reported. Opening mechanism is damaged. Give me a minute to bypass it, Sophie moved closer to the pod's small window. Jake saw her face change, going from professional interest to genuine concern. "There's someone in there. I can see them. Ben, hurry." Ben worked fast, his fingers flying over the pod's control panel. Sparks flew. Something clicked. The pod's door hissed and began to open. Atmosphere vented out in a rush of air that looked slightly green in the cargo bay lights. "Getting readings on the occupant," Sophie said. Her scanner held up to the opening door. "Severe injuries. Oxygen deprivation, though not oxygen like ours. Lung damage. Possible internal bleeding. This person should be dead." The door opened fully. Inside was something that looked vaguely humanoid, but definitely not human. Gray skin, too many joints in the arms, eyes that were large and dark and currently closed. The being wore what might have been a uniform, though it was torn and covered in something that might have been blood. Sophie did not hesitate. She climbed into the pod and began checking vital signs with her equipment. "Still alive. Barely. We need to move them now." The crew carefully extracted the alien from the pod and placed them on a medical stretcher. Sophie ran beside the stretcher as they rushed toward the medical bay, calling out numbers and instructions that Jake did not fully understand. Jake watched them go. His crew was trying to save someone they did not know from a species they had never met, who might not even survive the next hour. They were doing it because it was the right thing to do. That was what made them human. Vectra woke up to the smell of something burning, and her first thought was that she had died and gone to the punishment void. Her second thought was that the punishment void smelled surprisingly like overcooked vegetables. She tried to open her eyes, but the light was too bright. Everything hurt. Her chest felt like someone had stuffed it with broken glass. Her breathing was wrong, each inhale too easy and too full. The air tasted strange, metallic and sharp. "Easy there, don't try to move yet." The voice spoke in Zenthari, but the accent was terrible, mangling the subtle throat harmonics. "You're safe. You're on our ship. Do you understand me?" Vectra managed to crack her eyes open. Above her stood a human female with dark skin and kind eyes. She wore white clothing with strange symbols on it. Medical attire, Vectra's brain supplied. This was a doctor, or at least, this was someone pretending to be a doctor. "Where?" Vectra's voice came out as a croak. Her throat was raw. "You're on the Stellar Ranger," the human said. "I'm Dr. Sophie Martinez. We found your escape pod 3 days ago. You were pretty much dead when we pulled you out. But you're not dead now, so that's progress." 3 days. Vectra tried to process that. She had been unconscious for 3 days. That meant significant medical intervention. That meant resources spent. That meant debt. "Cost?" she managed to ask. "How much?" Sophie looked confused. "How much what?" "Debt. I owe. Treatment cost." Understanding dawned on Sophie's face, followed by something that might have been sadness. "Oh, honey, no, you don't owe us anything. We helped you because you needed help, that's all." That made no sense. Vectra tried to sit up, but pain shot through her entire body, and she collapsed back onto the medical bed. Sophie gently pressed her back down. "I said don't move. You've got broken ribs, a punctured lung cavity, and about a dozen other injuries I don't even have names for because I've never treated your species before. You're lucky to be alive." "Luck is not a valid scientific concept," Vectra said automatically. It was something her teachers had always said. Sophie laughed, a warm sound that seemed out of place in a medical facility. "Well, lucky or not, you're stuck in this bed for at least another week, maybe 2. Your body needs time to heal." Over the following days, Vectra slowly recovered. Sophie visited her several times each day, checking her vital signs and adjusting the atmospheric mixture in the medical bay. The doctor had somehow managed to recreate a close approximation of Zenthari air, though she admitted she was mostly guessing based on the readings from the escape pod. "I've never done alien medicine before," Sophie confessed one morning while changing Vectra's bandages. All my training is for human patients. But biology is biology, right? You've got things that need to stay inside your body and things that need to stay outside your body. My job is to make sure those things stay where they belong. Other crew members visited too. Ben, the engineer, came by to ask questions about the escape pod's systems. He was fascinated by the design, especially the emergency power distribution. Lisa, the security officer, interviewed Vectra about the pirate attack, taking notes on everything. Amy, the communications officer, helped set up a better translation system so Vectra could speak more easily with the crew. And Captain Jake came by every day, usually in the evening, to sit beside her bed and talk. He told her stories about Earth, about human history, about the stars they had visited. Vectra listened with growing confusion. Nothing the captain said made sense from a Xanthari perspective. "So your species fights wars against each other?" she asked one night. "Your own kind?" "We used to," Jake admitted. "Still do sometimes, though not as often as before. We're working on it." "That is inefficient." "Yeah, war usually is." Jake leaned back in his chair. "But we're learning, slowly. It took us a long time to figure out that working together is better than fighting." "But you waste so many resources on the weak," Vectra pressed, "on the sick, on those who cannot contribute. Why?" Jake was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Because every person matters. Because someone who's weak today might be strong tomorrow. Because the person you save might go on to save someone else. But mostly, we do it because it's the right thing to do, because we'd want someone to do the same for us." "My people would not have saved you," Vectra said bluntly. "If our positions were reversed, the AI would have calculated that you were not worth the resources. You would have died in that pod." "I know," Jake said. "Your ship's logs mention that. The AI decided you weren't worth saving." Shame burned through Vectra's chest. The AI was correct. I was severely injured. My skills were not unique. Resources should have gone to others. "That AI was an idiot." Jake's voice was firm. "You're an engineer, right? A good one, from what Ben tells me. You figured out our life support systems in 2 days. You've already given us 3 ideas for improving our power efficiency. You're not worthless. You're valuable. And even if you weren't, you'd still deserve to live." Vectra did not know what to say to that. In her entire life, no one had ever suggested that a person's value was separate from their usefulness. It was a strange concept, a human concept. By the end of the first week, Vectra was well enough to move around the medical bay. Sophie showed her how to use the human bathroom facilities, which were bizarre but functional. Ben brought her a portable datapad loaded with information about human culture, engineering principles, and entertainment videos. Apparently, humans watched fictional stories for enjoyment, which seemed like a waste of time, until Vectra found herself watching a series about a group of explorers and could not stop. The crew treated her like she was one of them. They included her in meal times, even though she could only eat certain foods. They asked her opinion on technical problems. They laughed at her observations about human strangeness, and they laughed at themselves too. They seemed to find joy in the most inefficient things. One afternoon, Vectra was sitting in the observation deck with Chris, the first officer. They watched the stars streak past as the ship traveled through faster-than-light space. Chris was eating something he called a sandwich, and he had brought one for Vectra, too, carefully made with ingredients she could digest. "Can I ask you something?" Vectra said. "Sure." Chris took a bite of his sandwich. "Why do you do this? All of you. Why did you save me? Why do you waste time talking to me? Why do you make special food for me? What do you gain?" Chris chewed thoughtfully before answering. "We gain a friend. Isn't that enough?" "Friendship is not a resource." "Sure it is. It's just a different kind of resource. One that grows when you share it instead of shrinking." Chris smiled at her. Look, I get that your people think differently. That's fine. Every species has its own way. But humans? We figured out a long time ago that we're stronger together. That the person you help today might be the person who helps you tomorrow. Or maybe they help someone else and that person helps you. It all comes around. That is not logical, Vectra argued. There is no guarantee of return benefit. No, there's not, Chris agreed. But we do it anyway, because the universe is big and cold and scary, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and the void is another person who cares whether you live or die. Vectra looked out at the stars. She thought about her own people, about the efficiency protocols, about the AI that had deemed her expendable. She thought about dying alone in that pod, accepting it as correct and logical and right. Then she thought about the humans finding her. Sophie spending 3 days learning alien medicine to keep her alive, Ben modifying their systems to give her proper air, Jake sitting beside her bed every night to make sure she did not feel alone. Maybe efficiency was not everything. Maybe there was something more important. She did not have a word for it in Zenthari. But the humans did. They called it compassion, and for the first time in her life, Vectra wondered if her people had been wrong. The alarms started screaming at 3 in the morning, ship time. Vectra jerked awake in her quarters, her heart's pounding. She had been dreaming about the pirate attack again, about the feeling of her ship breaking apart around her. For a moment, she thought the dream was bleeding into reality. Then Amy's voice came over the ship-wide intercom, tense and professional. All crew to battle stations. We have incoming hostiles. Repeat, battle stations. Vectra stumbled out of bed, still weak, but much stronger than she had been 2 weeks ago. She grabbed the emergency breathing mask Sophie had given her and headed for the bridge. The corridors were filled with crew members running to their positions. No one tried to stop her. The bridge was chaos. Jake sat in the command chair, his face grim. Amy worked the communications station, her fingers flying over the controls. Lisa stood at the weapons console, and Ben was already shouting through an open channel to the engine room. Chris appeared from somewhere and took his position at the navigation controls. "What's happening?" Vectra asked. Jake glanced at her. "Pirates, 3 ships, Krell design. They just dropped out of FTL behind us and sent us a message." "What did they say?" "They want you." Jake's jaw was tight. "They know you're on board. They know you witnessed their attack on your research vessel. They want us to hand you over and surrender our cargo." Vectra's blood went cold. The Krell were notorious across the galaxy. They did not leave witnesses. If the pirates took her, she would not die quickly or easily. "You should give me to them." Everyone on the bridge turned to stare at her. "You should give me to them," Vectra repeated. "It is the logical choice. I am one individual. You are 12. My life is not worth risking all of yours. This is basic efficiency calculation." Jake stood up from his chair and walked over to her. He was not a tall man, but somehow he seemed bigger than he was. "Let me make something very clear. We don't hand people over to pirates. Not now, not ever. You're crew. That means we protect you." "I am not crew. I am cargo. I am a resource drain. You should minimize your losses." "She's got a point, Captain," Ben called from his station. "Those Krell ships have serious firepower. We're a cargo hauler, not a warship. We can't win this fight." "Then we won't fight," Jake said. "We'll run." "Sir, they're faster than we are," Chris reported. "They'll catch us before we can jump to FTL. We need time to charge the drive." "How much time?" 8 minutes. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the 3 Krell ships closing in. "Can you buy us 8 minutes, Lisa?" Lisa checked her weapons systems. The Stellar Ranger had defensive weapons, but they were designed for small asteroids and debris, not military-grade pirate vessels. "I can try, but Captain, I have to be honest. Our chances are not good. Our chances are never good. Jake said. That's what makes us human. We fight anyway. He moved back to his chair and opened a channel to the Krell ships. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Stellar Ranger. We reject your demands. We will not surrender our crew member, and we will not surrender our cargo. If you want to fight, come and get one. He closed the channel. The bridge was silent for a moment. Well, Amy said quietly, that was possibly the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say, Captain. And I've heard you say some pretty stupid things. Jake grinned. Thank you, Lieutenant. Now let's show these pirates what humans do when someone threatens our people. The battle started badly and got worse. The Krell ships opened fire the moment their weapons were in range. The Stellar Ranger's shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the impact, but the shield strength dropped 15% in the first volley. Lisa returned fire, but the cargo ship's weapons were designed for precision, not power. Her shots bounced off the pirate shields like raindrops. Shield strength at 70%, Amy called out. Another hit like that and we're in trouble. Evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered. Chris, make us a hard target. Chris sent the ship into a rolling dive that made Vectra's stomach lurch. The next volley of pirate fire missed, though not by much, but the maneuver cost them. FTL charge at 40%, Chris reported, but these evasive moves are pulling power from the drive. At this rate, it'll take 12 minutes to charge, not 8. Another hit rocked the ship. Vectra grabbed a railing to keep from falling. The lights flickered. Shields at 50%, Amy announced. Hull breach on Deck 3. Emergency seals holding. Vectra watched the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating trajectories and possibilities. The Krell ships were working as a coordinated unit, surrounding the Stellar Ranger in a triangle formation. They were herding the cargo ship, limiting its options. It was an efficient strategy, an effective strategy, a winning strategy. Captain, we cannot win this battle, Vectra said. I know, Jake replied, never taking his eyes off the display. You will all die for me. That is not acceptable. That's not your choice to make. Another explosion. The ship shuddered. Ben's voice came through the intercom, strained. Engineering here. That last hit took out the secondary power coupling. I can reroute, but it'll take time. We don't have time, Lisa said. She fired again, scoring a lucky hit on one of the Krell ships. Its shields flickered but held. Weapons are overheating. If I keep firing at this rate, they'll burn out. Vectra's mind raced. There had to be a solution. There was always a solution. Her people had taught her that every problem could be broken down into components, every component could be analyzed, every analysis led to an answer. But what was the answer when you were outgunned, outnumbered, and running out of time? Then she saw it. A possibility. A dangerous possibility. A possibility that violated every Xanthari safety protocol and several galactic laws. But it might work. Captain, she said urgently, I have an idea, but it is risky. Jake looked at her. At this point, I'll take risky. What have you got? The cargo bay. You are carrying medical supplies, yes? Including electromagnetic field generators for hospital equipment? Ben answered through the intercom. Yeah, we've got 6 of them in Bay 2. Big industrial models. Why? And your power core uses a magnetic containment system? Every ship does, Ben said. That's basic engineering. Then we can create an electromagnetic pulse, a large one, large enough to disable the Krell ship's targeting systems. There was silence on the bridge. Then Ben's voice, very carefully neutral. That would also disable our own systems, including life support, shields, and engines. We'd be dead in space. Not if we shut down our own systems first in a controlled manner. We activate the pulse. Wait 3 seconds, then emergency restart. The Krell will not expect it. They will not have time to prepare. Their systems will scramble. We will have a window to escape. How big a window? Jake asked. 30 seconds, perhaps 40. Enough time to jump to FTL if your drive is charged. The drive is at 60%, Chris said. That's not enough for a safe jump. Then we make an unsafe jump, Jake decided. Ben, can you set this up? Captain, this is insane. The pulse could fry our entire electrical system. We could lose everything. Life support, navigation, communications, we'd be drifting. Can you set it up? Jake repeated. There was a long pause. Then, yeah, I can set it up. Give me 2 minutes. Vectra moved to one of the auxiliary stations and started pulling up system diagrams. This was her idea. She would help implement it. Her fingers worked over the controls, routing power, calculating field strengths, preparing the sequence. It felt good to be doing something, to be useful, to be more than just a resource drain. Krell ship's closing, Lisa warned. They're setting up for a final attack run. They're going to hit us with everything they've got. Let them, Jake said. Ben, status? Ready on your mark, Captain. Chris, be ready to jump the second we get an opening. Aye, sir. Vectra finished her calculations. She looked at the results and felt her heart sink. Captain, I must inform you that this plan has a 43% chance of failure. Jake smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had decided to do something dangerous and stupid and was looking forward to it. Then we've got a 57% chance of success. Amy, tell me when those pirates are in perfect formation. The Krell ships moved into position, triangulating their fire for maximum damage. This was it, the killing blow. Now, Amy said. Do it, Jake ordered. Vectra and Ben activated the pulse simultaneously. Every light on the ship went out. For one terrifying moment, there was total darkness and total silence. Then the cargo bay erupted with electromagnetic energy, a wave of invisible force that spread out in all directions like a shock wave. Through the window, Vectra saw the Krell ships suddenly go dark, dead in space. Restart, now, Jake shouted. The Stellar Rangers systems came back online one by one, lights, life support, engines. Chris's hands flew over the navigation controls. Jump, Jake commanded. The stars stretched, space twisted, and the Stellar Ranger disappeared into FTL, leaving 3 disabled pirate ships behind. The message from the Zenthari government arrived 6 days after the battle. Vectra was in the mess hall, learning to drink something called coffee when Amy came to find her. Vectra, you need to come to the bridge. There's a transmission for you. It's from your people. Vectra's hands tightened around the coffee cup. She had known this moment would come. Her family would have received her final message by now. The government would have tracked her location. They would want her back for judgment. On the bridge, Jake stood waiting beside the communications console. His face was difficult to read, which usually meant he was angry. Vectra had learned to recognize the subtle signs of human emotion over the past weeks. They're demanding your return, Jake said without preamble. They say you violated protocols by surviving when you were deemed non-viable. They want to conduct what they call an abandonment review. Vectra felt her heart sink. An abandonment review was not really a review. It was a formality before punishment. She would be exiled from Zenthari space at best. At worst, she would be eliminated as a failed resource. The logic was simple. If you survived when you should have died, you had wasted resources that could have gone to someone more worthy. I understand, she said quietly. When do they want me? They don't get you, Jake said flatly. Vectra stared at him. Captain, you cannot refuse a government demand. It will cause a diplomatic incident. Your Earth authorities will not be pleased. Let Earth authorities be displeased. Let the Zenthari government be displeased. I don't care. Jake crossed his arms. Your crew. You're under my protection. I'm not handing you over to people who are going to punish you for not dying. This is not logical, Vectra protested. I am one individual. Your relationship with an entire species is more important. The resources spent protecting me are not justified by the return benefit. Stop talking about resources, Jake said, his voice sharp. You're not a resource. You're a person, and we protect our people. Over the next week, the situation escalated. The Xanthari government filed official complaints with Earth authorities. Jake filed his own reports, detailing the rescue and the pirate attack. Vectra's story began spreading through diplomatic channels, then through less official channels. News networks picked it up. Social media exploded with debates. Everyone had an opinion about the cargo ship captain who had defied two governments for an alien engineer. Earth's response surprised everyone, including Jake. Instead of demanding that he return Vectra, they offered her asylum, full citizenship, protection under human law. The message from Earth's diplomatic corps was clear. Humans did not hand people over to face punishment for surviving. Vectra sat in Jake's office, reading the asylum offer on his datapad. The words blurred together. She had to read them 3 times before they made sense. I do not understand, she said. Your government does not know me. I have contributed nothing to your society. Why would they do this? Jake leaned back in his chair. Because we've been where you are. Throughout our history, people have fled from places that wanted to hurt them. We've made a lot of mistakes over the years. But one thing we figured out is that giving people safety is never a mistake. Your people want to punish you for living. We want to help you keep living. The choice seems pretty simple to us. If I accept this asylum, I can never return to Xanthari space. I will be cut off from my family. My entire life will be gone. I know, Jake said gently. And I'm sorry. But the alternative is worse. Vectra thought about her family. Her mother who had taught her engineering. Her father who had taught her logic. Her siblings who she had grown up with. They had followed the rules their entire lives. They believed in efficiency, in order, in the protocols that governed every aspect of Xanthari society. They would not understand her choice. They would see it as betrayal. But then she thought about dying in that escape pod, about accepting death as logical and correct, about the humans who had found her and refused to accept that logic, about Jake sitting beside her bed every evening, about Sophie learning alien medicine to save her, about Ben teaching her human engineering, about the crew who had risked their lives to protect her. She thought about compassion. I accept the asylum, she said. Jake smiled, and it reached his eyes. Welcome to humanity, Vectra. We're glad to have you. The paperwork took time. There were forms to sign, procedures to follow, official statements to make. Vectra recorded a testimony about her experience, which was transmitted to dozens of news networks across human space. She told her story simply and clearly. She had been abandoned by her own people as inefficient, and humans had saved her because they believed every life had value. The testimony spread beyond human space. Other species began picking it up. Soon, Vectra's story was being discussed in trading posts and diplomatic lounges across the galaxy. Some species dismissed it as typical human sentimentality, but others started asking questions. If the humans were willing to die for a stranger, what did that say about human allies? What did it say about human enemies? 3 months after the rescue, Vectra officially became a member of the Stellar Rangers crew. Her title was Xenotechnology Specialist, but her real job was more complicated than that. She advised on alien systems. She helped negotiate with non-human traders. She translated cultural differences. She built bridges between species that had never really talked before. But more than that, she lived as proof of something important. She was proof that the human way worked, that compassion was not weakness, that protecting the vulnerable was not wasteful, that every life mattered, even when the calculations said otherwise. One evening, she found herself in the observation deck again, watching the stars. Jake joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and sat down beside her. "You know, we've been getting letters," he said. "From all over, people asking about you, other species who heard your story." "What kind of letters?" "Mostly curiosity. Some of them are questioning their own protocols. There's a Zenthari engineer who wrote saying that your story made her think about efficiency differently. A couple of Krell refugees asking about asylum. Even some government officials from species I've never heard of, wanting to know more about human philosophy." Vectra sipped her coffee. She had learned to like it, though she still found it too bitter. "My people believe I am a traitor, that I chose sentiment over logic." "What do you believe?" She was quiet for a long time, thinking about her answer. "I believe that logic without compassion is incomplete, that efficiency without humanity is empty, that there are things worth more than resources and calculations and protocols." She looked at Jake. "I believe that the measure of a civilization is not how well it operates, but how it treats those who cannot operate well." Jake nodded slowly. "Your people might come around eventually. It takes time to change the way an entire species thinks. But seeds grow slowly. You're planting seeds, Vectra. Your story is making people question things they never questioned before." "One story cannot change the galaxy." "No," Jake agreed. "But one story can start the change. And then another story and another. Pretty soon you've got a movement." He stood up and stretched. "Get some rest. We've got a delivery to make tomorrow, and Ben wants your help with the new power distribution system." After Jake left, Vectra stayed in the observation deck, watching the stars stream past. She thought about the escape pod, about dying alone in the dark, about the moment she heard that transmission. "Help is coming. Hold on." 3 simple words that had changed everything. She pulled out her personal datapad and began composing a message. Not to her family, they would not want to hear from her, but to the open networks, to anyone who might be listening. She titled it simply, "A Message to Those Left Behind." "My name is Vectra," she began. "I was abandoned to die in space because my species calculated that I was not worth the resources to save. But a human vessel spoke into the dark and told me to hold on. They came for me when they had no reason to come. They saved me when it would have been easier to let me die. They protected me when it would have been safer to hand me over. They did this not because I was useful to them, but because they believed I deserved to live." She paused, thinking about her next words carefully. "I am writing this for everyone who has been told they do not matter. For everyone who has been deemed inefficient or non-viable or worthless. For everyone who has been left behind by systems that care more about resources than people. I am writing to tell you that there is another way, that somewhere in this vast galaxy, there are beings who will answer when you call for help, who will speak into the dark when you need to hear a voice, who will refuse to abandon you even when all logic says they should." She looked out at the stars, at the infinite possibilities stretching before her. "If you are drifting alone in the void, hold on. Help is coming. The humans are coming, and they will not leave you to die in the dark." Vectra sent the message and watched it disappear into the network, spreading across the galaxy at the speed of light. She did not know if anyone would read it. She did not know if it would change anything. But she had learned something important from the humans. Sometimes you do things not because you can calculate the outcome, but because they are right. Outside the window, the stars continued their ancient dance, and somewhere out there, Vectra knew someone else was calling for help in the darkness. She hoped that a human vessel would hear them. She hoped someone would speak back into the void and say those 3 simple words. "Help is coming. Hold on." That was what humans did. They answered when someone called. They spoke into the dark. They refused to leave people behind. And maybe, just maybe, the rest of the galaxy would learn to do the same.